to all three of you for your introductions for this morning's sessions and for the day-long conference. It sets the tone very suitably for the remainder of the day. I'm going to look down towards the centre again. Can I ask if the sound was okay for the last speaker? It was okay. I was a little bit concerned about that. Well, the first session of today's conference, having gone through the introductory sessions, the first session is going to look at the topic of leadership. And can I invite the speakers and panellists for this session to join us up here at the table? We're going to be joined by Nicky Matthews, by Olof Martinsson, by Maurice Conway, Niamh Kiernan and Laura Joye. So as we can keep to as much of a strict a time as possible, we're not going to be reading out detailed biographies. So instead, we're going to guide you towards the biographies that can be found in your booklets. The first speaker this morning is going to be Nicola Matthews, who is the Senior Architect in the National Built Heritage Service, supporting the delivery of the EU Architectural Policy Programme as part of the Irish Presidency, which is being coordinated by State Architect Conor Strehan. Nicky.
That's fine. Have it. We have it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Super. Just tell me if I'm right here. You hear me okay? Yes? Perfect. Down lower? Yeah. Okay. Happy? Yeah. No. How about that? Yeah? Yeah. Super. Thank you very much. Many thanks to the Irish Georgian Society for hosting this conference and for the great support of our European colleagues in Europe House for making it possible. This conference, focusing on a culture of adaptation and reuse, is part of a wider programme of architectural policy events to unfold during Ireland's EU presidency, led by the State and Principal Architect, Conor Strehan. Conor Strehan was very much looking forward to opening the proceedings and this first session focusing on leadership. Unfortunately, due to a close family bereavement, Conor has been unable to attend. And just to say, our thoughts are very much with him and his family at this time. And first text message on my phone this morning was best wishes from Conor for a great conference. For this reason, my presentation on EU architectural policy in action has been brought forward to this opening session to set the scene for the day and to draw the thread that runs throughout it all. Slide 1 establishes the relationship between the first EU architectural policy towards a shared culture of architecture with Ireland's national policy on architecture, Places for People. Its objectives on the right-hand side provide the structure for today's conference and programme. Architectural Policies in Europe, the second report from the Architects' Council of Europe, written by João Bento, shows the significant progress in the development of official policies on architecture and built environment design across member states. It describes the considerable momentum arising from ongoing collaboration and engagement on architectural policy under the EU Work Plan for Culture 2023-2026, through participation in the working group of member state experts on high-quality living environment for all, guided by Jutta Kastner, Policy Officer in DG EAC. Benefits to participants of this network come from shared experience in promoting the delivery of high-quality living environment through implementation of Davos Quality Criteria and Baukultur, EU architectural policy recommendations, and the values and principles of the new European Bauhaus approach. For Europe to progress towards a carbon-neutral continent, to create a more sustainable way of life by 2050, the establishment of member states' architectural policies is recognised as an important point of coordination and collaboration towards a common goal. Baukultur of Conversion 2022 to 23. Europe must lead a cultural shift towards inclusive, sustainable and quality-driven transformation of buildings and places. This recognises prioritising the reuse of existing building stock alongside new construction, avoiding unnecessary demolition and waste, supporting circular economy principles, traditional skills, and good practice in retrofitting, repair, and maintenance. This report prompts a new vision, a culture of conversion in our urban centres, importantly recognising leadership role of public authorities, very much framing today's discussion on new life for historic buildings and places through a shared culture of adaptation and reuse, and in the process, climate protection through the use of existing assets. The Krakow Declaration 2024, New European Bauhaus, Heritage and Transformation. This report was very much demonstrates the alignment of key architectural heritage stakeholders. It acknowledges the specific value of historic buildings and places, their vulnerability to maladaptation, vacancy, and adverse change through inappropriate intervention and renovation processes. It encourages the re-evaluation of our inheritance, our built heritage, the mobilisation of the creative sector to adopt a different mindset to the reimagining of our built environment through the lens of the new European Bauhaus, in order to make a more sustainable, inclusive and beautiful places for communities to live well in, while preserving sense of place, architectural character and cultural significance. It sets out 7 guiding principles relevant to today's conference. Firstly, favour the renovation and adaptive reuse of the existing building stock. 2, take advantage of innovation and traditional knowledge. 3, upskill architects and heritage professionals. 4, co-create with people, leaving no one behind. 5, champion quality as a core guiding principle of governance, funding and funding mechanisms. 6, share knowledge and learn from each other. 7, adapt our built heritage to risks and ensure adequate preparedness. This is a roadmap for a culture of adaptation and reuse. It also struck a chord in terms of EORDF Thrive funding programme. EORDF Thrive funding programme is a funding programme that was designed for Ireland. It is connected to the new European Bauhaus. Ireland is recognised as the first member state to embed the new European Bauhaus values and principles within EU cohesion funding, with the design of the EORDF Thrive funding programme by Southern Regional Assembly, the managing authority responsible with the North West Regional Assembly for its implementation. This 120 million funding mainstreams the new European Bauhaus values and principles, and is seen at a European level as significant, and as other member states are interested in its progress and design. Of course, at a national level, it's the first time that quality criteria has been embedded in the funding programme to ensure high quality outcomes. Benefits arising from working with the new European Bauhaus approach include community building capacity and conversations about future resilience and climate change action. This funding programme has supported local authorities to lead on heritage-led regeneration, knowledge sharing and peer learning opportunities, transdisciplinary practice, co-design and engagement with communities, etc., has been met with much enthusiasm so far. A set of good practice case studies will be delivered across the country on different typologies, construction, materials, conditions, and providing a significant range of projects to be disseminated future. Images on the screen show present condition and future visions. Thrive funding programme will be dealt with in more detail later, but I just want to suggest this is the EU, this is the European Urban Initiative training. We had 2 different events. This one was with Heritage and New European Bauhaus. And this was a question: how do we deliver adaptive reuse projects in the Irish context, overcoming constraints and challenges? And I suppose this slide very much, or this question posed at the time, is really the nucleus of this conference, and really points to the opportunity of the EORDF Thrive programme in Ireland as the starting point of a journey on which we can build a culture of adaptation and reuse. And we have other supports from Europe, like the ongoing networking opportunities of the peer-to-peer learning that is for municipalities, the inclusion of prizes for municipalities in the New European Bauhaus Festival, and I suppose very much the graphics from this year's festival really sort of demonstrate the focus of bringing people, creatives, researchers, policymakers together to explore how to design places that put people first, to benefit all. And this very much brings me to the last slide, value for money. Value for many. The title for the architectural policy programme to take place during the Irish presidency, coordinated by the OPW and led by the state and principal architect Conor Sreenan from the 19th to the 21st of November. And just to say that the outcomes of this conference will be brought forward to that programme, and the objective of that conference is very much to put architecture as a priority for many. Thank you.
Now, many thanks, Nikki, for setting the tone for the day's conference and setting out the topics and issues that we might anticipate to be considered during the course of the next number of sessions. I'm delighted to introduce the keynote speaker for this session, Olof Martinsson. Olof is the Chief Heritage Officer in Malmö with responsibility for the city's cultural environments from both a conservation and a strategic perspective. He's going to be talking on the topic of historic places and spaces under transformation. Olof.
Thank you. This is not working. No. My presentation has disappeared. Further down.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. That's what it was. I came ahead of it.
Yeah. Up.
Great. Yeah.
That's the first. Yeah, that's my first picture. But do I change the picture?
So that's forward, that's back,
Backwards,
and that's
yeah.
a pointer if you want it.
Yep, thank you. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conference. I'm honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing some reflections on transformation and adaptive reuse. I do a lot of presentation on this topic in Swedish, mostly. I'm not going to talk Swedish today. I think I do it in English, but you have to bear with me because I'm not used to talk English all the time, as you guys are. I hope I do well. So far, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. My name is Olof Martinsson, and I serve as the Chief Heritage Officer in Malmö in Sweden. Most of my work revolves around urban planning and development, making sure that cultural environments are treated as an equal and integrated part of the planning process in the city, just like all other perspectives that we work with within the city. No, it's not working.
Oh, so it'd probably better if you use this. Is that okay? Oh.
But it's not working.
It's true, it's not. Let's see what Daniel has to say.
Technology. We should have an overhead machine. Yeah, plastic sheets. Yeah.
Daniel's coming now. It's deceased. It's probably something really. Sorry, Daniel. Sorry, Daniel's coming now. Sorry, it's somebody obvious. Sorry.
No.
It's not in presentation.
Oh, it's in presentation.
Thank you, Daniel. Sorry.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. No. All right. Sorry about that. Issues related to cultural environments cannot be handled in isolation. They need to be included from the very beginning of our processes, shaping opportunities rather than limiting them. As we all know, this is not always the case. Today, I'd like to share why I believe heritage and cultural environment should guide us as we develop our cities. And I will do this through the lens of Varvsstaden, an old shipyard area in Malmö that is currently transforming into a vibrant new district of the city. Way, it worked, yeah. But first, let me start with a brief update on Malmö today. Climate considerations and circular perspectives now permeate every aspect of urban development. Malmö is in many aspects still a post-industrial city. We have many older industrial sites close to the city center, which makes the transformation of industrial heritage a major part of Malmö's development right now. Another concern for us right now is that a lot of contemporary architecture lacks strong connection to place, despite the fact that the buildings that we build will stand for decades. And that's why we aim for architecture that strengthens local identity and highlights Malmö's characteristic contrasts. In short, we want architecture that makes Malmö more Malmö. And our existing buildings and places are an invaluable source of inspiration to that work. And this leads us to the idea that heritage is in fact a resource. When we truly consider heritage and cultural environments as assets, it becomes easier to argue for a broader range of methods for preserving, transformation, and reusing them. Now I will present 2 slides for you. It's a short history lesson over Malmö. 2 slides, 300 years. No problem, yeah. This is Malmö in the early 1700s. As you can see, the ocean is still very close to the historic city core. The castle down in the bottom and the defense line are still visible and forms the border to the sea. No harbor has yet been established. If we jump forward in time, 300 years, we end up here, or today. This is Malmö today. Over time, the harbor has created a physical and visual barrier disconnecting the city from the sea. And all you see here in this picture is reclaimed land or landfills out in the ocean. And therefore, one of our key goals today is to restore the connection to the sea, reclaiming the waterfront for public life, and of course, preserve and transform the legacy of the harbor. And Varvsstaden, the old shipyard area in Malmö, is one major example of how we are doing that right now. Varvsstaden, or the shipyard district in English, its history begins in the late 1700s when Malmö's harbor was established. In the 1870s, Kockums, as the shipyard is called, launched a large shipyard here, expanding rapidly in the early 1900s. By the mid-1900s, Kockums was one of the largest shipyards in the world. The area includes Malmö's oldest dry dock, historic quays, and countless industrial traces, such as cranes, tracks, piers, and bollards. These elements give Varvsstaden its distinctive identity, now carefully woven into the new development. Varvsstaden forms part of the Western Harbour and will continue to grow over many years. New housing, offices, and schools, and a preschool are already completed, with more homes and new parks on the way. The land is owned and developed by a private company called Varvsstaden AB. And I have worked with this transformation for nearly 10 years now. And throughout this process, we have not only transformed the area, we have also transformed the way we work with urban development and adaptive reuse. And here are some examples. I'm just going to drink some. This is one of the buildings in Varvsstaden that has been transformed. This is what we call gjuteriet, or the foundry. This is one of Varvsstaden's most iconic buildings. Built in 1910 and reshaped many times, it originally housed the casting of ship components. 5 years ago, this building was a complete ruin. Today, it is a modern office building completed in 2023, yet it retains its strong industrial identity. A lightweight timber structure forms the new framework, as you can see, allowing the original steel structure to remain the primary load-bearing system. 2 facades were preserved and highlighted, and 2 other facades were rebuilt using 45,000 reused bricks sourced from demolished buildings within the district. Another building is the carpentry, or snickeriet in Swedish. This is the oldest preserved building in Varvsstaden. It dates back to the 1870s. This small-scale carpentry building features a beautiful wooden structure and still shows traces of renovations from the 1930s and the 1970s, which are still visible. It has now been carefully restored and transformed into offices because of expected sea level rise, which is a major problem when we are developing our cities nearby the coast or the ocean. The entire building was lifted 1/2 meter using a steel frame and nearly 50 jacks. A remarkable engineering effort. Another example that is being under construction right now is the welding and boiler workshop. It will soon receive 2 new extensions, one in the north and one in the south. It's the south one we look at in this picture, primarily for office use. These additions make extensive use of materials from demolished buildings in the area. Reused metal sheets, reused glass, and even an integrated overhead crane track, as the one you saw on the picture before. I will show you again. The large overhead crane track is the same as in the bottom of the new building, cut in half, reused as part of the load-bearing structure. And finally, the most recent example from Varvsstaden, it's a new park shaped entirely by what was already on site. It sits inside a former industrial hall where parts of the crane structure remain freshly painted in their original colors. The mix of robust industrial elements and lush vegetation gives the park a unique character that is truly grounded in the place. In this transformation from shipyard to urban district, existing values are carefully refined, both through preserving buildings and by dismantling others so their materials can be reused. The goal is for 80% of all existing materials within the area to be reused, repurposed, or recycled within the district. To support this, Varvsstaden has developed what they call a material bank, where materials are stored, catalogued, and prepared for application in new buildings. This means that not only culturally valuable buildings are preserved, although I would argue that most buildings have cultural values. Industrial elements, cranes, beams, and tracks are also being given new life and new functions. And now I would like to share what we have learned from Varvsstaden and this project and other transformation projects in Malmö, and what I think is super important for successful transformation and adaptive reuse. Well, the overall mission, I think, should be protecting the resources that we already have. Our greatest challenge, without question, is restoring the health of the planet. For me, this is not only about saving heritage, it's about how heritage can help save the planet. This challenge increasingly shapes urban development and the construction sector, yet systemic change remains slow. I'm looking at you. Heritage and cultural environments can support and accelerate this transition. Approaching sustainability, environmental, social, and cultural becomes much easier when heritage perspectives guide our work. And these are some of my key learnings so far. And this, I think, is absolutely key. We need to change our mindset. We need to shift from a reactive mindset to a proactive one. Too often, discussions are framed as a choice between preserve or demolish. This is far too limited. There are always more options than simply keep or remove. For too long, decision-making has focused on what is allowed and what is not, often without a holistic perspective. In Malmö, we have shifted the conversation toward how change should happen rather than whether it should happen at all. Some environments, of course, are so valuable that they must be preserved in a traditional meaning, but most buildings can be adapted and transformed. No, yes, that's the right picture, sorry. I was a little bit confused there. Take this ferry terminal, for instance. It's from the mid-1980s. 10 years ago, we saw no cultural value in it at all, because it was from the mid-1980s. Today, we recognize its significance. In a traditional process, it would likely have been demolished, but instead, it remains a functional building with a meaningful connection to its place. What matters most is creating space for open dialogue, free from predetermined outcomes. In Malmö, we are trying to find that dialogue and collaboration, both within our own system, the municipality, but also with the private sector. And in my opinion, that is how we find the most grounded, meaningful way forward and ensure that cultural environments serve as an equal part of city planning. Another thing that I think is key, can you read what the, yeah? Heritage and cultural environments should be the starting point for almost every transformation project. When we begin with what is already there, we can better understand which qualities to strengthen and which to set aside. This approach is not only about deciding if a building stays or goes, it's about letting the place itself inspire decisions about future functions, design, and transformation. Some of you may know Jane Jacobs, yes? She's the famous American cultural geographer who once said, "New ideas need old buildings." And it's a quote that has stayed with me for a long time, not only because it speaks to buildings, 2 minutes, but because it captures a mindset for city development. By studying a place and its history, new ideas can emerge about its future. And it's not only grand monuments that matter. Even a simple brick wall with patina and authenticity contributes to the story of a place. Economic models. As we all know, current economic models prioritize short-term profit. The challenge is finding new models that support slower, more thoughtful processes. I don't yet know exactly what these new models look like, but I want to empathize how essential it is that we address the economic dimension of transformation and adaptive reuse more seriously. And finally, 1 minute or urban development and transformation take time. It's no longer business as usual. We must work differently, and discovering how to work differently also takes time. One of my main learnings is that the modernist approach, planning at a single point in time for something intended to last forever, is not the best way to care for our heritage. we need to build in some kind of flexibility in order to handle the fact that everything is in constant movement. The cultural environment is a valuable and finite resource. Once it's gone for good. Successful transformation therefore requires deep knowledge of a place and a mindset of doing as little as possible, as late as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Olof. Now, our next three panelists are each going to have an opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. Do we want them to speak from their seats or to come up here?
I think we want to move slides.
Okay, to move sides. So if I'm first going to introduce our first speaker is Maurice Conway. Maurice is the senior architect in economic development with Waterford City and County Council.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak about Waterford. Although Nicky, Olof and Malmö are quite a difficult act to follow, I had no idea we had so much in common. Again, Maurice Conway, architect of Waterford City and County Council. The slide here I'm just showing you is the Van der Hagen painting of Waterford from 1735. It was painted about 20 years after the city walls came down, and it represents a city in transition. As we rebalance the city in Waterford at the moment with our North Quays project and a new bridge, we're a city in transition. We realise that regeneration is a process of transition, and we understand that in Waterford. I think the other thing from the painting here is the grain of the city, and that's quite important. Our approach in Waterford has been to repair the fabric of the city. So the building is not the unit of architecture for us. It's actually the neighbourhood. Understanding how the repair of the building, the repair of the space around it works together. So the building and the public space, the building activating the public space, and the public space supporting the use of the building. What you see here is the Viking Triangle. It's 20 years of work. We're completing today Project 19. I couldn't mention refurbishment or regeneration work in Waterford without mentioning my predecessor, Rupert Maddock, who started this thinking 20 years ago. But our way of thinking has been to target strategically located, vacant, underused, derelict properties and spaces, to think about clusters of buildings and to see how we can catalyse works within the city. So that's just a snapshot of one particular cluster. Particular issues that we're facing. Sorry, can you hear me? Particular issues that we're facing. This is Cathedral Square. It's 5 buildings, residential, commercial, and cultural around one of our oldest squares. One of the issues that we faced, even it's one of our smallest projects, is the building in blue that you see here. It's 5 and 6 Cathedral Square. It's an old almshouse dating from 1478. We think probably the oldest continuously inhabited domestic structure in the country. The problem we had here is that the building wanted to fall down. It had lost its structural integrity, which after much research and when we got in there, we realised we couldn't write a bill. We couldn't describe the work, apart from saying you need to take it apart bit by bit. Difficult to quantify that. So we had to take on the building direct, build it direct labour or refurbish it direct labour, which meant the local authority taking on the liability. I think that's important because we're talking about leadership and local authority. Local's fine, but authority I struggle with because our organisation is all about responsibility, not really authority. So that was one that we took on, was a particular issue that we don't think many other organisations could have taken it on because of the liability issue. This is pretty key. It's the gift that keeps on giving for me. I've been 12 years working on this project. It's 15 buildings, 2 terraces, residential, commercial, and some cultural buildings. As a matter of fact, the building here in the foreground on your left is our extension to the Museum of Time, which we're opening this evening. If any of you are in Waterford, please come and see the museum. But the particular problems here, you can see the patchwork quilt just down here on the right. That's the plots that we had to assemble. And we had to use all of our powers to get those plots together in order to make some kind of a viable project. We had to use some statutory acquisition rights that we have. So again, another organisation without those powers just couldn't do this project. So we've got, of the 15 buildings, we've got 5 refurbished already. We're opening one today, and hopefully in the next 2 years we'll finish the project. This is Friary Square with our refurbished terrace, and we've got 14 city centre apartments, 6 commercial units and a new square. So it's mixed use, all the time thinking about a mixed use in a collection. This is, we've lost our captions actually, so I don't know what happened there. This is a project that we're hoping to start within the next couple of weeks. This is the elephant in the room. It's 3 and 4 Great Georgia Street, a Georgian building, 2 Georgian buildings. They were the old parochial houses. We've got 1,600 square metres of floor space that we've got to refurbish. From that, we'll get less than 900 square metres of lettable floor space. So the cost here, the payback is 43 years. There's not a hope in hell of anybody, any commercial operation taking this on. So essentially, we're finding the acquisition cost of anything that I've shown you here, plus the refurbishment cost, far outweighs the value of the building. So no commercial operator can take it on, so it must be a state agency. And I think that's the importance of the TRI fund. This one is under URDF, the RRDF, the ERDF, all of the funds that we work under. Without them, it doesn't matter how clever or innovative we are, we can't really do anything. And I really would like to stress that and thank, I know some of my colleagues and some of the funds are here. Again, a 16-year project shared between ourselves and the diocese. You would have said both organisations with deep pockets, but impossible without those funding streams to get it through. I think the only other thing I want to say is that apart from the funding, there seems to be a fog of complexity falling on all of these type of buildings. And I really think we need to put our heads together to figure out how we might work through that, because even though the funding is becoming available, delivering these buildings and developing these buildings is becoming more and more difficult. And I'd like to collectively, if we could figure out that and stop it, because we need to keep moving with those. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Maurice. I'm intrigued by the suggestion that Waterford City and County Council has deep pockets, and I'm sure that the finance people and the council, and possibly more importantly the diocese, would be horrified to think that they've lots of money to throw at projects. But really enlightening, and always hearing about Waterford makes you just want to visit the city and to be inspired by what's being achieved there. Our next speaker is Niamh Kiernan. Niamh is a senior executive architectural conservation officer responsible for managing the development management team in the conservation section in the Dublin City Council.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to Nicky Matthews and to Emily Henderson and to Conor Shreenan for asking me to present today at this very exciting conference. I'm honoured to be here, and I hope to share some examples of high-quality adaptive reuse schemes across the city, which have brought vacant and derelict buildings into a sustainable new use, and which have acted as a catalyst for further positive change in the city. So the first thing I want to talk about is reiterating Peter Power's words of earlier this morning, that the greenest building is one that is already built, coined by Carl Elefante in 2007. And what I wanted to say is that this phrase forms the backbone of 2 chapters of the Dublin City Council Development Plan 2022 to 2028, both in the first chapter, which is to do with climate change, and the Built Heritage chapter also, from which all planning and conservation policies are derived. So all development needs to adhere to the policies that are set out in the Dublin City Council Development Plan. So, just briefly showing some really exciting projects that have been finished across the city in recent years. This is the Lower House in Grange Gorman, recently rehabilitated by Fitzgerald Kavanagh and Partners Architects. The Lower House is the oldest building in Grange Gorman and was part of the original Richmond Asylum built between 1810 and 1815. Originally designed by Francis Johnson, who also designed the General Post Office on O'Connell Street, the two buildings share architectural similarities, which led to the Lower House standing in for the GPO during the filming of Neil Jordan's Michael Collins in 1996. The Lower House was abandoned in the 1980s and fell into ruin. The structure was stabilised in 2015, and works to bring the building back to a new sustainable use began in 2019 under the guidance of Fitzgerald Kavanagh and Partners. And this is what it looks like today. The project is one of rescue and reuse. Completed in January 2021, this £14.8 million project involved over 4,000 square metres of refurbishment, including new extensions, despite challenges posed by the COVID pandemic. It currently houses the TU Dublin Student Union, music practice rooms, a dance studio and fitness spaces. And the restoration of the Lower House earned recognition for its innovative conservation and repurposing of the historic site, and now serves as a key student hub featuring a canteen, sports studio and music practice rooms. It won the prestigious Conservation, Adaptation and Reuse Award at the 2023 RIAI Architectural Awards, and the jury noted that this project was distinctive for its confident use of modern materials and careful conservation of historic fabric within an intelligent plan layout. Housing diverse functions including gym, canteen, music rooms and student administration, this vibrant student centre represents an adaptation of and confident departure from the building's original role, but the building is never forgotten. And I also want to show very, very briefly 3 long-term and short-term residential adaptive reuse projects across the city. The first is recent rehabilitation of 49 to 51 Amiens Street, carried out by Lawrence and Long Architects. The historic Georgian core of Dublin is characterised by elegant brick facades and harmonious streetscapes. And this mixed-use infill development was granted planning permission in 2020 after having had a difficult planning history previously. But when this came in to the council, it went straight through the planning process without any issue at all. It was a very confident, architecturally imaginative scheme which brought the derelict buildings and the facade-retained buildings back into a viable new use, whilst also allowing for a very high-quality architectural infill project as well. An atrium behind the retained facade at the centre of the development provides access to the accommodation, brings light, ventilation and acoustic separation, and unifies and organises the site, whilst preserving the site's historic identity and connection to the streetscape. And this lovely project was nominated for the European Union Prize for Contemporary Architecture, the Mies van der Rohe Awards in 2026. I also want to show 14 Clarendon Street. 14 Clarendon Street is a Dutch Billy typology from the 18th century, which had survived behind a later 20th century rebuilt facade. The simple, modest facade belies the fragile and rare interiors of this early Georgian structure, which is steeped in character and history. The restoration and repair of number 14 Clarendon Street brought a dilapidated and partially derelict early building back into active residential use at the upper floors and a viable commercial use at the ground floor. And of particular interest to this building is the presence of very rare early panelling which survived and which the architects I have it written down because I don't want to lose it here. The success of this project has been greatly influenced by the careful processes of repair informed by specialist craftsmen, tradespersons, and intricate bespoke detailing. What's really important about this project is that because of its rare its rarity, the floor plan is presented in its whole, and the use has been adapted. The use is that it has been designed in a way that will ensure that the original floor plan layout and the really important panelling of the 18th century is fully appreciated within the spaces. And with that came a lot of work to ensure that building regulations in terms of fire and in terms of access were also considered in the rehabilitation of this structure. 24 to 25 Fenian Street is a historic 3-storey over-basement building dating from about 1725. At one time, it was a tenement, derelict for a number of years and subject of endangerment action. So the Dublin City Council Conservation Section worked closely with the Buildings at Risk Officer and the architect, McCullough Mulvin Architects, towards the careful rehabilitation of this derelict structure. I'll move on to this slide because we're busy. But the ambition of the proposal was to restore the protected structure using conservation best practice, bringing a long-term use to the historic building, and to develop the yard to the rear with a new sustainable building to expand the accommodation. The works to the existing house along Fenian Street return it to its original character and has a dramatic impact on the streetscape of Fenian Street, whilst retaining evidence of its later residential use in the 20th century. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about Henrietta Street, 14 Henrietta Street, Georgian townhouse in Dublin, built in 1748 and appropriated in 1877 to house multiple working class families. This project, which was led by Shaftesbury Architects, encompasses a 12-year phased programme of works from 2005 to 2018 to rescue number 14 from imminent collapse and to conserve and adapt the house for new cultural uses, culminating in the 14 Henrietta Street Museum. And what's really interesting about this is that the building itself is the artefact, and the building has the works that have been undertaken by Shaftesbury Architects keep and present and retain this development of the building through the ages, the earliest Georgian part of the building as well as its later iterations. And the floor has to work very, very hard in order to accommodate the new use of a museum and a cultural use. Okay, thank you very much.
Many thanks, Niamh. I'm moving quickly on. It's interesting to see that mix of public and private projects that have been undertaken, and hopefully we'll have a quick chance at the end to explore that a little bit further. I'd finally like to introduce Laura Joye. Laura has served as Port Heritage Director at Dublin Port since 2017, where he oversees the 300-year-old Port Archive and leads the Port City Integration Team.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invite. I'm going to try and stick to my 5 minutes, so I'm going to throw myself into it. This image, a bit like Olof, is just to give you an idea of the city and how much has been reclaimed from the sea. So the outline that you see there is the modern port, but everything else has been filled in since the 1720s. So the port company was established in 1708 as the ballast office, and we're very, very lucky that the archive has survived since that date, so 318 years. But essentially, the port company and all its various guises beforehand have filled in the bay and have moved eastwards, because in ports, and what ports want to chase is depth, because as the ships get bigger, you need more water and you need depth. And that's one of the challenges on the east coast of Ireland, is if you've ever been up to Gormastown or even on Sandymount Beach, you may have noticed that there's a lot of sand, and sand isn't good when you want to have a port. So if Dublin hadn't solved its challenge of getting bigger ships into the city, I'm afraid Cork would have become our capital, which would have been terrible for us. So just to kind of give you the solution that we had was these two walls were built. So the Great South Wall is a 5-kilometre wall that starts off at the East Link Bridge. Sadly has disappeared in a series of sewerage works and power stations. But the last 2.2 kilometres you can walk out to that wonderful Poolbeg Lighthouse, which was first lit in 1767. And because of those two walls on the north wall on the north side that created Dollymount Beach and Dollymount Island, we are now open as a port. So today we're reliant on this 18th century infrastructure to keep us open, but it keeps all the sand away from Sandymount and Merrion Strands and on the north side, and creates a depth of about 9 metres for us. And you can see one of the ferries going out there. On the right-hand side, again, mainly for an Irish audience, just to kind of give you the idea of scale, we have an idea in Ireland that we have lots and lots of ports. As you can see, when it comes to containerization and ro-ro, essentially 80% of everything is coming through Dublin. So it's a very busy place. We get 20 ships a day compared to Rosslair's 35 a week. And because of this wonderful thing that we have under our city called the Port Tunnel, we don't really see the trucks that come into the port. So we get 5,000 trucks come into the port every day, and 5,000 go out. So we count that as 10,000 trucks in and out of the port to keep the whole country operating. And again, it's not because the port is a wonderfully efficient team that we have in the port. The reality is that 1.5 million people live in the Greater Dublin area, and the nearest and quickest way to get to market from Europe is to go through Dublin. The other point to make out is that we're commercial semi-state, and we're one of the utilities similar to USB. There's 160 of us in the team in Dublin, but we are a landlord port, which is a very common European model, not very common in the US and in the UK, but it is the model that we follow, and then we have about 4,000 people working in the various companies. So there's a balance, and Olof has mentioned this, between ourselves and the engineers and the accountants. We're madly working on a master plan 2040 to rebuild the port, chasing in many ways and catching up on underfunding throughout the 20th century. And then myself and my colleague Jim Keller, who is here at the back, have worked on port city integration over the last 10 years. And what we've created is this map which lays out all the preservation of buildings that we've preserved to create a distributed museum. And linking all those lines that you see on that map is the greenways that we're using to connect everybody. And in 2004, our first greenway opened, which is the Talca Greenway, that area of green that you see in the top of the map. And I would encourage you to go down there. 183,000 people went there last year. At the moment, we're getting, between the Great South Wall and our greenways and our distributed museum network, 380,000 people a year are visiting the port. And our ambition is to increase that to 1 million people. But just to break down the buildings that we have preserved, in 2015, Jim preserved this wonderful building on the left-hand side, the Diving Bell Museum, which receives 90,000 people a year go into it. The Diving Bell was essential in creating the port in the 19th century. It's being lifted up in a museum inserted underneath, and that is open between 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. In 2018, we rebuilt the area around our port centre, brought up one of our 3 heritage cranes, Crane 29, up on into that garden. And then more recently, we've opened up the Pump House Heritage Area, and we're hoping to unveil Graving Dock 1, or Dry Dock 1, which was built in the 1860s, which was regrettably filled in about 30 years ago. And our most modern one is the substation. The substation is our small museum on East Wall Road, which we found the original East Wall Road. Seawall that's there that you can see in the basement. And finally, just to finish up on our great ambition is to redevelop the old Odlum site, which is in the centre of the port, consists of some buildings with preservation orders, others not. It's an area at one stage that produced 1/3 of all our flour in the country, went out of operation in 2014. We spent a large amount of money doing enabling works on it, and we have a great ambition that you can see here with our colleagues in the wonderful Grafton Architects to create a wonderful cultural quarter in the port area. So this is the kind of high point of what we've been developing to over the last couple of years. And I'm going to leave that there for the day if you would like to have a look. And it's great to see Jer here. And it's been a privilege to work with Grafton over the last 8 years. And they're a wonderful team. And finally, we have a conservation plan, which lists all of our heritage assets. We're very keen that people are aware of what we have. And that identifies all the preservation, either in relation to DCC, but also in relation to the Great South Wall and other parts of the port estate. We actually have national monument status. So we have a big challenge in having a very active port, which is vital for keeping the country open, but at the same time full of lots and lots of heritage. And that is supported by our archive, which is wonderful and visual and has its own specific website. And then finally, sorry, somebody's taking a photograph there. We would encourage you to go and learn more about what we do on our own website, which is dublinport.com or the dublinportarchive.com. And for the photographer, if you want to take a photograph. You can see it's a very, very visual collection of well over 40,000 engineering drawings dating back to the 1720s and 78,000 photographs. So it's okay? Great. Okay.
Now, many thanks to you all for participating in this session. That we have a brief moment in time, I think 5 minutes or thereabouts, to present questions to the panel. I have a question that I'm going to start off with, and that it relates to Malmö and Olof. This shift in attitudes, this decision to try and change the way you thought about heritage-led regeneration. That was on the subject of leadership, which is this session. That the council drove this, but who did you engage with? Who are the key stakeholders that had to be brought along in that? There's presumably a heritage sector, but then there's others. There's a broader professional sector, and there's a corporate sector as well.
You need to turn it on. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Well, I think the key point is to find the collaboration, and as I said, heritage cannot be handled in isolation. It's the main thing. Most of my colleagues back in time, even myself, has considered us to be the one who every time says no to everything. We have to stop doing that. We have to start saying yes to change. And that's the way how we find our way in to collaborations with other perspectives. The most important is to find a collaboration between heritage officers and architects, I think.
Okay, good. We'll leave it at that. There's more you could say, but there's so little time available to us.
Yeah.
I'm struck by the role that local authorities play, that leadership role you play in doing works that others are unable to do, and notably in the context of Waterford, but great to see in the context of Dublin to see that there are private sector projects that were highlighted as well. What I thought of in the context of Waterford were there's 19 projects that have been undertaken over the course of the last 20 years. Has the council sought to measure how those public sector investments served as a catalyst for private sector investment?
I suppose we have. We've tried. I suppose there are so many metrics that you could use. But I think the philosophy that we've taken is very much a local authority philosophy that, if we build the road, then you can, build either side of it, build the street. So if we can deliver on something that nobody else can, the missing piece, that's what we're all the time looking for. What can nobody else do? What's the piece that we have to do in order to allow you to take it from there and move on? And that's been the important piece, is actually understanding that if we don't do this, and when I say we, I mean collectively, all of us, then it won't happen. And it's to identify those pieces that are not possible for others and deliver those.
And be able to think over the long term, as you said, a 43-year return on investment, which nobody else is going to do.
But you can't do it. If I was speaking with one of our project managers yesterday morning, and if you or I arrived in with a project that had a 43-year yield, they would investigate us. Because there would be a reason that we would be looking for an investment like that.
Just the thinking in terms of with the rubrics in Trinity, a similar approach was taken. The investment required for the refurbishment works in the building was even longer, the return on investment. I'm going to take a quick look at the time. Laura, I have a quick question. That the Dublin Port Authority it's a partially corporate, partially public. Possibly, but that's general. Mm-hmm. So there's a different approach that has to be taken there. More difficult, perhaps, to take that very long-term approach from a heritage regeneration point of view. That perhaps less likely to look at a 40-year return on investment. What sort of discussions occur in that regard?
Yes, we're a self-financing company. There we are. We're a self-financing semi-state, so therefore all the funding that we do, or any profits we make, go back into running the company. So we have a wonderful plan called the 2040 Master Plan, which kind of set out, there's two roles that the port has. One is improving capacity. The days of expansion, thankfully, have stopped because we're surrounded by nature reserves. And the other one is opening up the port and allowing people to come into it. And that's very common now with European ports. Ports around Europe are encouraging people to come into them. My role, there's people like myself and my colleague Jim all over Europe, opening up ports, getting people into ports. to see how they operate. There's kind of a myth, I think, based on London Port, that ports move, ports don't move. 90% of all ports in Europe haven't moved, and they're there for a reason, and it's important that we open them up and explain what we do. So coming back to your question, yeah, there's always that kind of balance, and the port is kind of planning to spend about 2 billion putting in new port facilities for bigger and faster ships, and then there's always that challenge of prioritisation. But we're very lucky that the master plan is an amazing blueprint that kind of sets out a balance between the two ambitions. But in the commercial sector, there's always a challenge.
And Niamh, very quickly, because we're just about to run out of time, in the context of Dublin City Council, the goal to ensure that the greenest building is the existing building. How much of a challenge does the conservation unit find in terms of a leadership challenge in terms of persuading property owners that this is the case?
Yeah.
I suppose, especially in the context of buildings that aren't protected, so the unprotected building.
Yeah, certainly the unprotected structures are the most at risk. So what we have in the development plan, for instance, are two policies. One is about protection of buildings that are on the first edition OS map. So they may not have statutory protection, but they have a value. They have been there since prior to, let's say, the 1820s, the 1830s. So there is a presumption for all development proposals that a building of that vintage will not be demolished, even if it is not a protected structure as yet. But it is on the applicant then to demonstrate that it is not of value. But in terms of planning policy, there is a policy there that protects those buildings. And then we have another policy which prioritises the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage, which is an inventory which is conducted by the Department of Heritage. Local Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. There's a special team in there, and their job is to identify and record the built heritage of the country. And there is an assumption in the development plan that if a structure is of regional significance or higher, that it, as determined by the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage, and that does include 20th century structures as well as older buildings, that also it will not be demolished as part of development proposals unless it can be demonstrated that there is no value to it, or if it can be demonstrated that there is a social good, a public benefit that outweighs that significance, but it needs to be demonstrated. So they are those discussions that take place in pre-planning meetings. But in the main, architects would look for anchors to use to drive development proposals, and they would use architectural heritage as a placemaking device and use that backdrop to help inform new proposals that work with it. But yes, absolutely, it's always a challenge. There's a lot of discussions in the background before it gets to planning.
I can truly imagine. Well, thank you very much to all four of you for contributing to this session. We're going to pass on to the next session, the chair of which is going to be Fionnuala Sweeney. Thank you very much.